Alright, hey guys, I hope your day's going well. Today I just want to talk about 14's current state. I've seen a lot of discussion and discourse about it recently, especially from other 14 creators. And I believe their viewpoints are slightly skewed, seeing as they are dedicated 14 creators. The main opinion I've seen floating around is the lack of content and the content drought, which isn't new to the game, right? I've been playing 14 since Heavensward, and this sort of drought has always been a part of the game where a patch comes out, you might have fun for like 1 to 3 weeks of doing the new content, new story, new raids if it is a raid patch, you know, new beast tribe. But at the end of the day, you do get caught up to the content, and then there really isn't much to log on for. Really, the weekly systems such as like tomestones or weekly savagery clears are kind of mediocre as far as meaningful content. It's kind of just like a pointless grind too, which ties into the gear just not being great in the game. Also, apologies if I'm all over this video. This is not a super scripted video. It's more me just giving my own thoughts and just kind of rambling. So the more popular opinion I've seen circulate around the game is from content creators saying that they're going to stop making 14 content altogether or slow down, which is valid. Being a 14 creator, it is really difficult to make content on this game, especially if this is the only game you're making content for. The game doesn't lend itself well to content creation, seeing as a lot of the end game activities are either social moments, which are it's hard to capture that into a video, or it's raiding, right? You got one of the two, and raiding isn't everybody's cup of tea. It's not necessarily the best content to watch. Typically people that are watching high-end raiding are people that already are raiding in the game, which is going to be a small population, which is really difficult then to grow an audience. Although I wouldn't recommend making this your dedicated game if you're looking to make content creation your full-time gig, because the game just isn't generous to that. Now, the other perceived issue by a large part of the community, at least a large vocal part of the community with the content drought, is there just not being enough daily systems, weekly systems. And personally, I actually find that to be a very big advantage that the game has. I really appreciate that 14 lets you get on, you play through the content a handful of times, you know, they're not on this infinite grind, infinite chase system, and you can put 14 down, go enjoy other games. The director of the game, Yoshi P, literally has said in an interview to just put the game down, unsub, go play some other games, and then come back and resub when there's new content and you want to play again, which I really respect. And I understand some people want to just no life, grind 14, they don't want to play anything else, and that's just not the game that it is, right? There are games out there that have these infinite grind systems where there's constantly events, constantly dailies to do, and I've played a good amount of them as well, and every single time I get burnt out, I drop them, right, to varying degrees, sometimes after like a month, sometimes 6 months. But these are games like ArcAge, Lost Ark, World of Warcraft, MapleStory, even more recently Throne and Liberty, even other games that aren't MMOs like different gachas like Arknights, Genshin Impact, Azur Lane, and then other games like Diablo. All these games, they just have battle passes, they have events that are constantly chained, right? So you have this crazy event, it's going to give you all these great rewards, and then as soon as you are done grinding that for a month, there's another event after that with more crazy rewards, and it just cycles like that on top of typically hours, like no joke, hours of dailies on top of weeklies, and it just becomes to the point to where you're treating it as if it's a second job, or just a full-time job in some of these games, and it's just too draining to upkeep that. Not to mention, if you're someone like me and you like to play other games that come out, like different Souls-like games, how I recently just played Wukong on stream, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I'm spending 4 hours every day grinding out another game like MapleStory, where you have to go through a huge checklist every day of dailies. And so when I see a lot of these 14 creators saying how, oh, tomestones are like, you know, just a few hours of content a week, right? You could just grind them out. Also, tomestones are just super annoying to grind out, I'm going to be honest. They just revolve around you either running like a hunt train for the 100th time, running expert dungeons, right? It's very tedious stuff. It's not engaging, it's not meaningful. And it's also just to get gear. Typically, I mean, you could use them for tome mats and stuff like that, but the use of them is pretty limiting too. Hey, what are you doing over here? Yeah, you enjoying the video? Well, make sure to like the video and subscribe, or else. Like I've mentioned before, I've played the game since Heavensward, and I've taken many breaks throughout the years of playing 14, like month-long breaks, where I won't play the game for multiple months at a time. And that's totally fine, and something I'm glad the game allows you to do, right? A lot of these other games, take World of Warcraft for example, you don't play for a couple weeks or a month, now you're suddenly behind on all these grind systems. You're not gonna basically ever catch up during that expansion at that point. And then again, when a new expansion does drop, they just have another new grind system to just waste your time in. So it's really all meaningless. And now I'm not totally against grindy systems in general, right? And 14, the few grindy systems they have, like typically the relic weapons and stuff like that, that take a bit of time to acquire, I enjoy that, and I think there is something cool about working towards something long-term and grinding towards something, and I appreciate that. However, there's a tactful way to do it, right? Not forcing you to log in every single day to grind it. I'm much more a fan of weekly systems in games, because let's say you have a bit more time during your week on a random Thursday, and you can dedicate a few hours in the evening to catch up on these systems, as opposed to forcing you to log in for like every single day for an hour and not being able to sort of stockpile it. There is a limit though to the stockpiling, because I recently played Throne and Liberty, and that game was insane with the amount of time you would have to dedicate to it. I got burnt out after probably like 3-4 weeks of the game, because that game had a system that I was talking about where you could stack up your daily dungeon runs, your daily mob kills, and you can back all this stuff up for like a week. The issue is that there's no quick way to burn it. So the game required you to play roughly like 2 to 3 hours to burn through all the daily systems for that single day. So if you were to stack them all up, you have like 16 hours of work on like a Sunday if you didn't play for that week. So sure, you can stack up a lot of the systems in that game, but then you're gonna have to work like an overtime shift, like double shift on Sunday to stay relevant and catch up in the game. And so when all these creators are pushing for more daily systems, more weekly systems, and say, oh my gosh, I only log on for 4 hours a week and then I'm all caught up on all my weeklies in 14, there's nothing to do. That's okay. I don't want the game to devolve into, oh, I gotta log on every day and do this, or you have like 20 hours worth of weekly stuff you have to do. Especially if they're tied to these like meaningless like chase systems that are just going to get outdated, especially when it comes to gear, right? I always believe if you're chasing gear, it should be for like glamour, especially in 14, because all the gear is going to get outdated. That's just how MMOs work, right? Like whatever gear you grind and get, there's going to be another expansion, there's going to be more gear, and the stuff you grinded for is going to be outdated. So I would much rather grind for cosmetics and you see, oh wow, that guy has, you know, this crazy cool weapon or armor set or title, and that's something you can keep with you, and it sort of shows a representation of the grind that you went through to get that. Because on the flip side, you have people that just want to instantly buy everything too, which I'm also not a fan of, right? Cash shops in general, I'm not a huge fan of. I really think it waters down the pool of items, because there's been a lot of times in 14 even where I've seen this like really cool mount, like Brute Justice or Cruise Chaser, whichever one it was, that I was like, wow, how did they get that? Like, did they do some hard like Blue Mage challenge or something really difficult? No, they just paid like 20 bucks, 25 bucks, whatever it is on the Mog station, and they got it. And I definitely think that waters down the experience when you're just going around and you just see everybody with these different cool items or mounts, and then you realize, oh, all they had to do was just swipe to get it. It doesn't, you know, they didn't do anything difficult in the game or anything cool. It's just swiping, and it just waters down the whole pool. So when a lot of these 14 creators are saying they want more content, I totally agree with them on that and can get behind it. However, I don't want just pointless chase systems content. At the time of this recording, the Chaotic Alliance raid isn't even out yet, so we don't know the reward structure or how they're going to do loot. But I really hope that it's not like an infinite sort of grind or just a super long grind to get the stuff out of it. I highly doubt it's going to be, based off of the track record of all the other content in the game. But I've seen some people championing behind like, oh my gosh, I hope the Chaotic Alliance raid is going to take us like 4 months to get all the loot out of it. And I just don't see the point in that. I think it's really silly to just have to grind a fight over and over and over again for 4 months just to get the minion, let's say, or the mount or title or whatever it is. I think 14 does the best when you go through the content initially and you get the best experience out of just going through it that first time. Things like the story, doing all the savage fights for the first time, doing ultimates for the first time. All these fights and experiences are really well made, and being able to go through them, learn them, and overcome them is super satisfying. But I don't think it's satisfying to just constantly have to grind them to get it. Like, imagine if when you cleared ultimate, they were just like, okay, good job, now you have to grind it 10 more times to get a single weapon, right? Like, sure, you could do it, and likely once you've overcome a fight in this game and memorized it, you can do it again, because like all this game is just pattern recognition and repeating it, right? There's like some variation to the patterns, etc. But once you have the pattern recognition down, it's just a matter of repeating it. And just doing that isn't necessarily fun. Like, learning the patterns is fun, executing it properly the first couple times is fun. Then after that, just repeating the fight over and over and over again is just a waste of time, in my opinion. Of course, there's people that like to optimize the fights, and if you're doing optimization and stuff, that could be fun on its own. But again, we're talking about a very small part of the community that's already small, being in the raiding scene of the community. And the game shouldn't be structured around that, where it's a standard to have to grind out a fight or a dungeon a ton of times. And I want to touch on relic weapons really quick too, because I think those are a good grind system in the game. Some expansions more than others. I thought Baja was peak. That's like peak relic weapon design, in my opinion, because it gives you a whole new zone. There's new dungeons tied to it, new bosses, new like systems with like all the actions and everything. And I thought it was really fun to go through. It's still even good content to, up until we're in Dawn Trail, it's still good content to go back into level. I think on the other ends of the spectrum, you got the Endwalker relic, which was just simply tombstones, which is super unimaginative, and I didn't like that at all. Like, that is too dumbed down. Like, that's a grind where, oh, you just cap your weekly tomes and then you turn them in and get the relic weapon. Like, it's super boring. There's nothing going on there. And then on the other end, you have like the Heaven's Ward relic weapon, and also even AR relic weapon, where they require you to, I remember in Heaven's Ward, I would grind the Great Google Library like 80 times in a row, just spamming that dungeon over and over and over again to like level up the anima and the weapon. I believe it was anima. And it's just such a grind, but it's not fun because all you're doing is just spamming the same low level dungeon over and over again mindlessly, like just watching YouTube on the side or something, because it just requires you to grind so much. To talk a little bit more about the gear, I would love to see the gear have more influence on your class. There is really only like 2 examples of this, being Samurai and Black Mage, where you can meld a ton of spell speed or skill speed, and it actually changes your rotation, and depending on the fight, it could be better or worse to have more or less skill speed or spell speed, and that's really cool. But that's 2 of the jobs out of all of them in the game, so I would love to see a lot more variation with that. I think healers might also have slight variation with like how much piety they meld and stuff, but typically you're just going to meld max damage and just go all crit, direct hit, or det, and then that's the game. And there's no set bonuses on the gear, there's no mix and match, right? Like every job typically has like a BIS sheet, and the only variation is in the substats where, oh, you want to hit a certain skill speed for your job, so instead of taking up the tome hat, you take the raid hat, or vice versa. And that's pretty much all the variation. There is still a lot of merit too in having the illusion of choice, because even when they have, let's say they had this expansive skill tree or more options, typically there's going to be 1 or 2 best builds, and it's going to be found out pretty quickly. Like, it'll be mapped out, spreadsheeted out, and shared online. But having that option to mess around with your build and maybe do off meta builds, and even just knowing as a player, like, okay, I chose to have the best build by looking it up, right? And you trust the spreadsheet you're reading or whatever, still feels better than having no options at all, which is basically where we're at right now. And they do keep saying that 8.0 next expansion after Dawn Trail is going to be the huge combat update that's going to change everything. So we're going to have to hold our breath and see, because in the past they have said, like, for example, Dragoon for this expansion, it was getting a quote-unquote rework, and in actuality they just changed like a couple things. Like, they took away Spine Shatter Dive and then just gave us basic gap closer with no potency tied to it, and the job hardly changed. Like, also the way they changed Dragoon at the start of Dawn Trail was making Mirage Dive after your jump, and the whole eye system, like, it's just gone now. Now you just hit Garrus Goggle, you immediately go into Life of the Dragon, which, granted, it does feel better, especially for your opener, but now it just leaves Mirage Dive and your eyes just kind of meaningless. And there's also one of the really cool things you could have done on Dragoon last expansion was stack up to have 2 life windows back to back, which was really cool because you could drift your Mirage Dives and your eyes and line it up in a way to have that. Now you can't do that. It's like way more cookie cutter. And this isn't unique to Dragoon. They've done this for a lot of other jobs, and the game has just been trending in this direction of making all the jobs easier. I know that's also frustrated a lot of people. I can understand that that's the direction the game's going, so we kind of just have to roll with it. And personally, I wouldn't want to go back to Heaven's Ward job design, where you drop a positional on Dragoon and you lose your whole combo. Like, that was brutal. And the jobs were way more difficult back then, because when it comes to fight design and difficulty, and job design, there's like thresholds, right? So if you make the fight design insanely difficult and you make the job design insanely difficult, you're going to end up with a population of players that's so small that can actually clear the content, right? And then on the other side, you have it to where if you have the jobs be really difficult like they were in Heaven's Ward, then you have to dumb down the fights a lot to make it actually clearable. And instead, they're opting to make the fights more difficult, the jobs easier, and that's the balance they're going with. You know, there's not going to be one solution that satisfies everybody, especially like the hardcore players that want hard jobs, hard fights, and they're going to be like the 0.0001% of the players that can even clear fights or care about it. And they shouldn't be designing around that small part of the population. In my opinion, I think the jobs can remain pretty easy and cookie cutter how they are right now. I would just like to see more options within the jobs. So going back to the samurai and black mage, like that's a really cool option where it changes up your rotation, having that much skill speed, and giving you that option would be nice to see on all the jobs. Anyhow, looping back to my original point, I think the game is in a good state as far as the content release schedule. It could be a bit quicker and it could have a bit more content, right? But I just don't want them to release these chase systems or force you to log on daily for these pointless grinds. Of course, if they are releasing more genuinely new content, like more fights, more EXs, more savage turns at a faster rate, that's awesome. That's all welcomed. But I don't want them to do something like in Heaven's Ward where they just release a relic weapon that forces you to grind like a basic low-level dungeon over and over and over again, and people being like, oh, that's so good, that's such good content, because no, it's not. It's just a pointless grind and you're just wasting your time. A lot of the opinions I've seen out there from these 14 creators too are from more recent ones that have started playing the game in Endwalker or Shadowbringers, somewhere around there. And so they've played the game for 2 to 4 years now, and they're not used to the content drought being this bad, right? Because if you started in Endwalker or Shadowbringers, it took you those years to catch up on all the fights you missed, like all the ultimates if they're raiders, or just all the casual content, like deep dungeons and Eureka and all these relic grinds and stuff. And now they're finally caught up with the game where a lot of us have been, and everybody will eventually get to as well if you play the game long enough. And they're just now reaching this state of either burnout or just not even burnout, but just like this desire for more, because they were on such a high cadence of content, catching up on everything. They were able to grind 14 for 12, 14 hours a day for years, catching up on all this content. And now they're at a point where they log on, they grind for 4 hours a week, and now they're like, well, now what do I do with my life? And unfortunately, 14 is never going to be at a rate. Honestly, no game is going to be at a rate that lets you grind 12 hours a day unless it just has meaningless chase systems. And I understand their feeling of missing or longing for something, but I think it's hard for them to realize what they're missing, because the game is never going to be able to pump out new meaningful content at that rate. The only way they could fill that void of grinding 12 hours a day on the game would be if they released pointless chase systems and grind systems. And I just don't think the game should ever go down that route. And in my opinion, I've been there before where I've quit the game, taken a break for months at a time. Like I'm talking like half a year even, I think was my longest break during Stormblood. And it's totally fine because you come back to the game, any story you missed, any content you missed, you can catch up, right? And you're not going to be missing out, because these other games that have these FOMO systems like Maple Story, Throne of Liberty, the other MMOs I mentioned, when I quit those games, it's because I'm genuinely burnt out, not just because there's not any content to do, because they always have so much content to do, that ultimately is just kind of pointless, right? It's like going on, kill 200 mobs every day, or complete these 5 quests where you go and kill 3 orcs and pick up 2 berries. And it's just like these pointless things, and you do it day in, day out, just for like very small progress on your character. And granted, slowly building up your character over time is rewarding and feels good, but when you realize you're wasting so much of your time, so much of your life into these games for such minimal like progress, it just, the illusion eventually wears out, and you burn out. And typically when you burn out like that, you're not returning to the game. Anyway, I feel like I've rambled on this topic enough. I just kind of want to give the alternative take that I haven't seen people talking about in the game, because everybody's just been championing more and more content. And sure, more like meaningful content is great, but I have seen people also say they just want more grind systems, and like, oh, only getting 4 hours worth of content a week is not enough. And I just want to caution them, like, truly what they're implying by that, and just taking a look at these other MMOs and why 14 hasn't followed in their footsteps. And I'm very grateful for that too. And I'm not sure how popular my opinion is. Maybe everybody just wants more content, they want more grind fests, they just want to do that. You know, feel free to disagree in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think too. And with that, I appreciate everybody listening to me ramble, watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.